Rowan Ramsey, federal member for Grey. Good to have you back with us on Flow.
Great to be with you, Ricky.
Now, speaking of flow, sounds like some more water's going to be flowing down some more pipelines. We're familiar with them all over your electorate from the River Murray and the like, but now we're going to look at some desalination potentially.
Yeah, well, there's a proposal being put up and backed by BHP and Nos Minerals to provide water in the north for the development of our resources sector, which I think is... We've still only scratched the surface, I think, in the north of South Australia on the Gawler Craton. And quite clearly we can't keep extracting down any more water out of the GAB. It's a very delicate system. It already delivers a lot of water right across the outback of South Australia, Queensland and northern New South Wales. But it takes thousands of years for that water to percolate down from Queensland and New Guinea. And we need to make sure that we keep enough pressure in the basin to keep the mound springs properly supplied, those ecosystems, and the pastoralists and towns that rely on along the way, that their water's not depleted either. So pretty much I think we're at max. And then you look at BHP, they're expanding Roxby Downs, but they've got this new development at Oak Dam, which some believe will be as big as Roxby. And I just had a bit of a check an hour or so ago, and I think there's 130 companies currently involved in either exploration or proving up deposits of copper in the north of South Australia. And this is an enormous resource for South Australia. It's a boom metal. The world's going to use more of it, and we need water to develop that industry.
Yeah, and speaking with Rebecca Knoll from the Chamber of Mines of Energy recently, she said because of this renewable technology and the reliance on copper, there's a real boom, as you say, on that going forward. But securing water is so important, not just for the basin, but also outside your electorate, I guess, the River Murray as well. The mining industry takes some water from there also.
Well, that is certainly right. There's already a significant amount. Not going to Carrapateena, the mining industry, but not that many people would know that One Steel in Whyalla or One Steel in Simac, I think the biggest single user of water in Murray water in South Australia. And I've had people here in the east, I'm in Canberra at the moment, say, well, what on earth's going on there? And I said, well, this is a great multiplier. It's actually using the water well. We're getting a lot more economic bang for that water than we do growing some of the products we do along the Murray. Not that I'm knocking any of that. But we know the Murray's at its max. It's in flood at the moment, and that's a fantastic thing, and all of the environment gets a good drink. But there are times when it's dry, and water for industry needs to be assured, 100% deliverable. So it just comes to a point where we've got to diversify. It's the same all around the world, and I spent quite some time, almost a decade ago now, looking at a number of large desalination systems in both Spain and Israel, and we are not on our own. And the development, as you touched on before, of more renewable energy to actually do this transformation of the water process is obviously a cleaner and greener way forward.
Yeah, and that's the key point, isn't it? Cleaner and greener. You've talked about protecting the basin, the Great Artesian Basin, protecting the River Murray, but there might be some environmental people concerned about saline discharge into the upper Spencer Gulf. Have you got concerns in that regard?
Well, I think there almost certainly will be. I mean, it's one of the reasons I did that study tour, as I say, about a decade ago now, 2011 I think it was, so there you go. And I think that will be part of the challenge of the business case. Now, there's 5 million coming from the state, for federal government, and 10 million from the state government for this process. And those things that business case will have to uncover will not only be the cost of desalination, but it will have to come up with an environmental impact statement and carefully go over whatever scientific materials available and develop new if needed. And then it'll have to buy a social licence as well. So that means it will have to assure those affected communities that there is no negative impact or virtually no likelihood of any negative impact on their industries or that particular environment. Now, the world has moved on a fair bit in 10 years, and there's a lot more desalination plants around the world than there were then. And by and large, they seem to be operating well without too much incident and too much kickback. But that is not to say that we shouldn't be fully aware of what's going on here. And I think if it points out anything, the debate over the siting of a desalination plant in Port Lincoln is that you need to make sure you've got the underlying science to absolutely back up any decision you finally make. Now, there are other options, on A, siting, and B, what you do with saline discharge. But that will be, once again, the business case's responsibility to have a look at all those options, I would have thought.
Yep, talking with the Chamber of Mines and Energy, they also indicated that it could, for future water usage for the mining industry, could be of a similar scale to the Adelaide desalination plant in terms of what it might need to produce. But it's also potentially, quite some distance away. We're only talking a business case here. Your expectation, if something like this was going to happen, we might be looking 10, 15 years in the future or sooner?
Oh, I think the need is more pressing than that. I don't know, if and when BHP would push the button, say, on Oak Dam. But considering I think it's about 65 kilometres from Roxby for a Olympic Dam, so it's not as if they'd have to build a completely new town and a new processing plant and all those kinds of things. What they can do is actually start mining ore and feeding it back into the system if they deem it's of suitable size and quality. That would require water, in that period. So I think the time frame will have to be a little bit sharper than 15 years. But it shouldn't be that hard. There's been a lot of science done, in the efforts back in 2011 when the large BHP expansion was planned at Roxby Downs. Now, I don't think that science will probably be exhaustive now. It will have to be revisited to see whether it's still relevant and still current and a lot of other things, and whether or not that's even the right site. They will be the things for this study to find out. I'll be just, wanting to make sure that we get the right answer with it.
Now, just if you talk about that shorter sort of time frame, grid-scale battery capabilities might not be on stream by then. Is there a scenario where it could become a pumped hydro kind of situation where you make the water and then you maybe store it somewhere in a dam arrangement like Snowy Hydro to maybe use the energy while the wind farms are turning?
I think there's a whole myriad of options in there. One is you can build your desal plant bigger and not run it all the time. Just run it when the cheap and renewable energy is available. But that means then, as you suggest, you've got to store probably desalinated water, and for pumping when you haven't got you haven't got production. So there are costs associated with it. The other way, of course, is you could store energy and then run the plant 100% of the time, and that energy could be in pumped hydro. You could maybe use gas to supplement that energy supply or electricity when you don't have it. So I think, there are so many different options you can talk about with this. I understand work is still continuing on the possibility of a pumped hydro project at Baruta, which is over the Gulf, of course, but these things are all in the mix, and decisions will have to be made. Now, it's way... I'm not the expert in this field. That's what the business case will be about, getting the best brains together and coming up with the best solutions and just how they engineer it so we have water all the time. The other issue is, do you store water at one end of the pipeline or do you store water at the other end of the pipeline? Another possibility might be saline discharge into existing salt lakes, for instance. So there are probably quite a few ways of going about this. And I think we've obviously got to announce that we're having a study on this and being put together, but I think people shouldn't jump to conclusions until that study is completed.
Well, Rowan Ramsey, if anything comes of it in terms of mining growth and maybe more towns, the electorate of Grey might shrink a little bit. You might not have so far to drive, or your successor perhaps in the seat one day.
I don't want to cut off Flow FM, but I reckon that may not be a bad thing if we saw a bit more growth in